Hello everyone, welcome back to another part of our Farming RPG series. So right now that we have our time system in place, we can begin to finish up the core mechanics of our game, the farming system. So first we need some assets for our crops. So let's go to our asset store and search for farm. And we'll get this low poly farm pack and import it. Now that it's imported, just take this, drag it to imported assets, open it up. We see we have a watering can over here. So we'll use this as an icon for our watering can. What we can do is disable the visibility of the grid, position, get a good angle of it, screenshot it, open up an editing software, paste it over, crop it up, and we'll use the magic wand tool to remove the background. So the tolerance. Now we want to make it match the style of the other icons. Our other icons have this outline on them. So how we can make this outline is to duplicate the layer. You can do this with any photo editing software. Just change the brightness to its lowest. Just make it entirely black and make it slightly bigger. I'm using a paint bucket tool to make it fatter. And then I'll move this layer behind and we have an outline. Flatten it up and save. I'm going to save this as a PNG file, call it watering can. Make sure you're saving it in the UI folder. So it's imported asset UI. So now that it's imported in here, take the texture type, change this to sprite, apply. Now we can go to our data, tools, and set the icon, set the sprite, the thumbnail. Yep, the thumbnail to our watering can. Looks a lot better now. It's not just an empty placeholder background. Okay, now that we have all this in order, let's grow some crops. In the example that we have, we need cabbage seeds. So we have a cabbage. This is what it's going to grow into. Let's move this to the prefabs folder under assets prefabs. Rename this to cabbage. And we'll assign this to our cabbage item. So in the scene, when this is instantiated, we should be able to see a proper cabbage model. Now let's go back to the seeds. So this is going to grow into the cabbage. Now if you look at the assets that we have, we just get the cabbage, but we don't get the seedling and all that. But in our farming system, when we plant something, it should progressively grow into a cabbage. So let's find another asset. It's called Cartoon Farm Crops. Import it. So it's these two folders. We can move this into the Cartoon Farm Crops folder, then move it into imported assets. And we have all these little things. Now we can create a crop game object. Call this crop. And we'll represent the various stages of the crop. So far, I think this looks the closest to a generic seedling, so I'm just going to use this called carrot plant. Maybe I'll duplicate this, rename it to cabbage seedling, and move this over to our prefabs folder. There. Here we have 3 stages of life. Let's make this crop a prefab. Create a new folder, we'll call this crops. Grab these 3, move it over here. So in our crops folder, let's do a bit of resizing. So that we don't want the dirt pile to be this big. Let's switch up the scale a little bit. Okay, we'll call this a seed. So in the seed stage, it's going to look like this. We don't want the seedling to be larger than the cabbage, so let's go into its prefab and half the size. Okay, still visible. So when it's a seed, it's going to look like this when you just plant it. And when it grows, this is going to sprout out. And when it's fully grown, it's going to be like this. But this isn't going to be the same for all plants. The only thing that will be consistent in all the crops that we plant is the seed. When the player first plants the crop, it's going to look like this. But the seedling and the harvest, the object that will be harvested, are going to be different. So we have to create a way for it to be defined in the item data, or more specifically, the seed data. Let's open up the seed data script. We'll add another variable. There we have it. Let's go to our seeds, our cabbage seeds, and set the seedling to our cabbage seedling. We'll delete the variable items. Now to make the crop game object work, let's create a new folder. Call it farming. We drag the land in. Create a new script. We'll call it crop behavior. Open it up. We don't need start and update. Instead, we're going to have plant and grow. This is going to be the crop class that will handle all crops, not just the cabbages. We need to store data on what this crop will grow into. Call this seed to grow. The reason why we aren't using the start function is because we want to take in the parameter seed to grow. So this dot seed to grow is gonna be the seed to grow. So now let's drag crop behavior over to our crop prefab. Our crops will have 3 states: seed, the seedling, and the harvestable. When you sow the seed, it's gonna be off-state seed. And once it grows, it's gonna be a seedling. And when it's done, it's gonna be harvestable. So now we need game objects for each of them. So the only game object that is public is going to be seed, because this is going to remain consistent. It's the only thing that will remain consistent for every crop. This is the current stage in the crop's growth. So next we have to set the game object for seedling and harvestable, and we'll do this in the plant function. Now first we need to get the harvestable game object. So in our data items, it's going to be in the item data under game model. Right, so we access it from crop to yield. So we'll access the crop first before we instantiate it. So we're going to instantiate crop to yield game model. Now that it's spawned these two, we have to find a way to determine switching states. So let's create a function. Now just setting the state to whatever the state we're going to switch to isn't going to be enough, because remember, we just instantiated these two objects, these two game objects, and they're going to be coexisting with the seed at the same time. So we first have to reset everything. Now that they're all inactive, we create a switch statement. Create a case for each one of them. Is to set it to true. Now we have a function that handles the state changes. We can set the initial stage to seed. This shouldn't be public, it's a private thing. Now for a way to plant it. How are we going to plant this? Using our land, of course, because our crops are only going to be growing on land. So let's edit our land script. So far we have created a way for us to use tools on the interact function. Right, we can check equipment data, but we haven't checked for seed data. So let's do a return here to stop execution. So the logic is going to be the same as equipment. We have to try casting the item data in the tool slot as seed data. So if it's not now, we're going to plant it. Let's set up the section for our crops. When the player plants a seed, it obviously is going to plant a crop prefab. Let's assign the crop prefab that we set up. Drag it here. We're also going to cache the crop behavior. It's going to be now by default. Now we have multiple conditions for the player to plant the seed. So first, he's holding a tool of type seed data. Second, the land state must be either water or farmland. And finally, there isn't already a crop that has been planted. So to meet these conditions, use an AND operator. land status is not land.soil, because soil is the only state that is not favorable, right? So it has to be either watered or farmland, so the opposite, it must not be soil. And finally, crop status, crop planted, must be null. Now we're going to instantiate the crop object, and it's going to be parented to our land. When we instantiate it, it's going to look like this, right? It's transformed to 0, so the player can't see it at all. So we have to move it up where it can be seen. Should be about 0.55. What's the offset? 0.51-ish. Yeah, 0.51 is fine. Okay. So we move it upwards. We access the crop behavior of our newly planted crop. We can do this with a get component. Finally, we're going to plant it. Let's try it out. So we're gonna equip. Let's go to our inventory. Inventory manager, tool slots. Whoops. Inventory manager, tool slots. Let's add some cabbage seeds. Okay, delete this crop game object here first. It shouldn't be able to exist by itself. We have to plant it. So, see, we can't plant it because it's just soil. So we need a hole, till the soil, and then we start planting. Anyways, we first have something we need to fix. In our crops, the seed shouldn't have a collider. We also need to check if there's anything equipped to begin with. I see. The offset has already been set. So we just have to set its position to be 0. Yeah, see, we're able to plant it just as we want. This is not so now we're able to plant the crop. We need to find a way to grow it. When the crop grows, it's going to be updated from here. Whenever it is watered, it's going to grow. Now remember, in our item data, we have in our seed data, we have this field called days to grow. So how we're going to set up the grow system, an int growth, and there's going to be an int max growth. Every time this function is called, this grow function is called, we're going to increase the growth by 1. only when it reaches this, it's going to be harvestable. And we're going to update this every time the land is watered. So in the land script, we're going to grow the planted crop under clock update. How do we get our max growth? Convert the days to grow into minutes. And then we're going to convert it using game timestamp dot days to hours. So it's going to convert into hours first. And then we're going to convert it into minutes. The reason why we're converting this to minutes is because our land updates by the minute. So before we grow into harvestable, we're going to grow it into a seedling first. So how do we calculate the germination time? Let's set it to 50% for now. And don't forget, we have to check the state. So the seed will sprout into a seedling. Now when we test, sow some seeds. I'm only going to water one of them. Since it takes 3 days to grow, it should sprout in 1.5 days. See, it sprouted. Let's tweak the sprout prefab a little bit. Remove the collider. Gonna rotate. It's gonna be rotate 90. Okay, let's try again. The first day, water them again. The next day, they're seedlings. Water them again. Bam, cabbages. When it's a cabbage, it's ready to harvest. So we should destroy this crop behavior because we don't have to care about whether it's growing anymore. But we don't want to destroy the cabbage along with the crop. So we'll unparent it first. Finally, we're gonna destroy the game object. Now that we have it grown into cabbages, we need a way for the player to harvest it. And that comes back to being able to pick up objects. In our previous part, we mentioned that when the player has this equipped, he should be holding the item itself, right? It should be rendered in the scene, and we have yet to do that. So let's set up a function in inventory manager. Instantiate whatever's in the player's hands. The next question is, where are we going to instantiate this on? And that is in our player on his hand. So let's go to his right arm, his right hand over here. Create a new game object for this hand point. Declare a transform. And we are going to assign it to our inventory manager script, endpoint, like that. So we're going to parent it to the endpoint. We need this function to be called whenever an item is moved. So in hand to inventory, let's add a function. Likewise, from inventory to hand, we have to update the changes to be under the item section, because that's only when the change has been made to the players. When our player has, see, now he has a cabbage on. Oh no, but we can't put it back because we have to check if it's null first, because the player can hold nothing. So it instantiates when I equip, but when I unequip it, there's nothing. It doesn't go away. It's because we have to reset everything before we instantiate a new game model. So we'll find the child count. So if there are things on the hand, there'll be more than one child. Don't forget .gameObject, because this is a transform. Yep, exactly as we want it. Let's set up the item interaction system now. So before that, let's go to player interaction. Go to player interaction, declare new function. So item interact. And we will call this in player controller. Since this is fire 1, which is left click, we'll do this with right click. Fire 2. Now, when this function is called, the player can either be holding nothing or he's holding something. So if I'm already holding this and I right click, I'm just going to keep it in my bag. This should return because we don't want it to conflict with our next logic. Now, how do we know what this game object is supposed to represent? Of course, we can see it's a cabbage, but the game doesn't know that. We have to make it so that the game knows what it is. Under inventory, let's create C# script, interactable object. And what it's going to store is just the item data. And now we'll tell Unity that this is a cabbage. Now, before we start on this logic, we have to set up the selection system for this interactable object. It's going to be the same as land, but it's going to be less complex. And we're gonna add this in the land function. We need a tag. We have to call it item. Let's go back to our cabbage prefab. set its tag to item. Then we'll get the component, selectable object. Yeah, this works. Now we need to make a way for it to deselect. First we have to return. So it's going to reset. So it's not null. We're going to pick it up. Let's create a function. It's going to be this item. It's going to render its hand. But since render hand is going to spawn a new copy of whatever the item is, we have to destroy whatever is on here. With that, we should be able to pick up cabbages. If I leave some of them lying around, let's see. Yep, the player can pick it up, keep it, and it adds to his inventory. But now that we are able to hold things, if we have a tool equipped for holding a cabbage, it still works, right? This doesn't make any sense because the player already has his hands full. He shouldn't be able to use his tools. So let's disable the tools if the player is holding something. So let's go back to player interaction. Under the interact function, and just return. Now he shouldn't be able to use a tool. Yeah, we can't use it. Now if you notice, when the player walks on the item, he just ends up climbing it. So if we put a ton of these, it's gonna be stairs for the player. See, he can just climb it, which is not what we want. So what we can do is that we add a new layer. Call this item. And we can also add another layer, call it player. And set the player's layer to player. Don't change the children, just the player object, because we want the interactor to still interact with the collider. Okay, so, and then we can go to project settings, under physics, see the item, just disable interactions with the item and the player object. So now the player should be able to walk through without any changes. Yep, he's just walking through. There's no change to his Y coordinates. And we can grow our crops. Okay. Now we're able to harvest them. Our inventory is full. Yep, with that we are done with our basic farming system. That is the base mechanic of this game. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and see you next time.